This is Dan, and this is the Napkin Academy. Today's lesson, we're going to get into some real specifics about how to build a great deck. The simple idea is that creating a great deck, the mechanical piece of our presentation, involves just a little bit of simple magic. We can think of a deck as kind of a deck of cards, and as the magicians and the card people talk about, a little bit of sleight of hand. As we know, we're starting on a journey. We're starting here, and over here beyond the distant horizon is our audience, and we're going to go on a journey to get ourselves across those peaks. The journey is one that's going to take us from making a flat, boring presentation, bending that up in order to make a really extraordinary presentation, one that really changes our audience. The path that we're going to take, we're going to get past fear, we're going to get past confusion, and we're going to get past boredom. And to do that, we're going to have a little bit of fun with our presentation. We're going to provide a lot of clarity to our thinking, and again, we're going to perform a little bit of magic, bringing us to delivery of an extraordinary presentation. The storylines that we've been talking about for the last several sessions are really the guide rope. If this is us as the presenter, and here's our audience, the storyline is the rope by which we pull that audience along with us to make sure that they're seeing the same things that we're seeing. The storylines, we've seen them many times now. We should be very good with them. The report delivers information. The explanation delivers new ability. The pitch gets us over a problem by presenting a new solution. And the drama takes us from where we are today through the pit of despair, but brings us back on the other side to an even greater level of happiness or ability. So again, those are the four storylines that we're going to choose from. We've talked about how to choose which one prior. Now what I want to share with you is, once we've selected the storyline, how do we go about building the actual presentation? The deck that we're going to be building is really going to be our map. Remember, we're leading this audience along with us. We've got our own ideas, we've got ourselves, and we've got our audience. The deck that we're going to be putting together is really the cheat sheet or the map or the guidebook for us that's going to make sure that we know where we're going so we can lead the other people along this line. Let's talk for a moment about what a presentation is not. A presentation is not a novel. We may be telling a great story, but we don't have the time to tell it as a novel. A presentation is not going to be a textbook. We may have technical information we want to deliver, but we won't be doing it as a textbook. It is not an instruction manual. There may be things we need to instruct, but in a presentation, there's a very unique way we go about teaching. And a presentation is not a scientific paper, even though we may be delivering a lot of data. Remember, a presentation is not what we want to say completely. A presentation is what our audience is willing to tolerate on what is going to be a very busy day of their own. A presentation is more like a song that people are going to want to sing with us. It's more like a poem that people are going to want to read with us. It's more like a comic book that people are going to want to follow along with us. It's more like a children's book that people are going to want to pay attention to. A presentation is not a marathon. A presentation is a relay. It's fast, there's a lot of action, and although we may be covering a great distance, we're not going to do it individually in one shot. We're going to do it with lots of handoffs from one idea to the next to make sure that we always keep the action going. A good presentation is less the epic Lawrence of Arabia, and it's a whole lot more Aladdin. Some people might say, but isn't that disrespecting our audience? To give our audience a comic book? To sing our audience a song or recite a poem? I would say absolutely not. It is the deepest sense of respect for our audience, because we are paying absolute respect to their time, of which they have very little. We're paying absolute respect to our audience's reality. They are busy people, and they're going through a lot of things on any given day, and they are giving us their time in order for us to present to them. And we have absolute respect for their tolerance. How much material is someone able to tolerate and accept in one period of time? That's what we're respecting. Why is this so? I did a count the other day. Over the last 6 years, I have delivered more than 600 presentations. Those could be big presentations where it's me talking to a huge group of people. They could be presentations where I'm part of a small team and we're talking to another small team. They could be presentations where it's just one-on-one. 600 of these, and I'll tell you something, I've learned some lessons. There are lots of great books on presentations out there, but the 4 lessons I want to share with you now, I've never seen written down. People really do always want to see something new. Okay, that's not so surprising. But what's important about this lesson is there is no such thing as boring knowledge. It does not matter what the subject of our presentation is. If we present it in a way which is new and compelling, people are guaranteed to find it interesting. There is no such thing as boring knowledge. There is only boring presentation. Anything can be made interesting if we build a solid presentation around it. Unspoken lesson number 2. As presenters, we have a lot more power than we think. Let's say that we're going in to make a pitch. This is us. This is our small team. And we're going to pitch a venture capital organization to try to give us some money. What we might expect is that those VC people, those venture capital people, are a lot bigger than us, a lot more experienced than us, a lot wealthier than us, have a lot more power than we do. And you know what? On a day-to-day basis, we are probably right. But for one brief moment, the time during which we are making our presentation, we have a tremendous amount of secret power. And here's what it is. We can actually see the future. And I'm not talking about necessarily being able to say what the future is going to bring in terms of market shifts or what big products are going to be successful. What I mean is for the 45 minutes or 90 minutes or 2 hours of our presentation, we are the only people in the room who know what is going to happen because we are the ones who built the presentation. These people are completely in our hands for that period of time because if we take total ownership of our presentation, we can tell any story we want in any order we want and captivate that audience. We have the power of completely running the crystal ball for the time that we are running our presentation. It's not something that many presenters think about, and it's really magic when you do. Lesson number 3. Always assume that our presentation is the 4th one that they've seen out of 5 on a day. And what I mean by this is something called decision fatigue is real. Always assume that as the presenter, the person we're presenting to has already seen enough for the day. Maybe one of our people in the audience is already asleep. Maybe one is thinking about the drink that they can't wait to have as soon as they get out of this room. Maybe one of them is worried about the traffic that they're going to run into on the way home. Assume that we're coming at the end of a long day and they've already seen a lot, so that we work very much smarter to make sure that our show is truly exceptional. Because let's face it, if they heard this presentation and this presentation and this presentation and this presentation and this presentation, and we're coming in here, knowing that, make sure that we are going to make this really, really special because we want to make sure they're compelled by it. And number 4, you all know this, nothing beats a picture. Nothing. You know what, folks? We need to talk presentation basics here for a moment. What I mean is stacking the deck. How are we going to take our slides and our deck, build the right slides and put them in the right order in order to make sure our presentation is extraordinary? Here's how we're going to do it. We're going to go back to the basics. Every presentation is contained in a deck. Every deck is composed of a set of individual slides. These are the basic pieces of every presentation we will ever make. It doesn't matter if we're going to use PowerPoint, or if we're going to use Keynote, or if we're going to use Prezi, or Google Docs, or flip charts, or napkins. Every presentation is a deck which is composed of individual slides. So what is this thing that I call a deck? Read along if you'd like. The deck is our complete presentation in a single standalone document. Remember, this is our kind of our roadmap that we're going to take with us to guide us as we go on our journey. Our deck contains our entire story and all the details in smoothly flowing order from beginning all the way to the end. My deck, hello, idea number 1, idea number 2, idea number 3, what action to take, thank you. That's my deck. Within a deck, what is a slide? A slide is the building block of a deck. A slide, and this is absolutely critical, a slide is a single idea made visible, and that is all it is. So here's a slide about a slide. I contain a headline, I contain a picture, I contain a caption, and I contain nothing else. That's what a slide is. A single idea made visible. Not all slides are good slides. During a presentation, single slides that try to explain multiple ideas, something like this, or something like this, or something like this, or explain one idea with too many words, like this, or like this, or like this, are going to fail. It has to do with the mechanics of how does an audience perceive information. As we go through our presentation, remember it's a relay race. Here's step 1. We pass off to step number 2. Not all slides are good slides. We want to make good slides, not bad slides. So how do we go about building a slide? And the subtext here, of course, is how do we go about building a good slide? Well, here's how. We look to the classics of information presentation. We're going to start with one of the most famous advertising campaigns of all time. Advertisements that introduced the Volkswagen car to the United States market way back in the very, very late 1950s. And look what we see. There's a big concept here, isn't there? There's a big idea. How do we sell a brand new car into a new market? We show a picture, we put a headline, and we have some text. The same is true of newspaper articles. How do we tell a compelling story? We put a headline, Men Walk on the Moon. We put an image, and then we put our text. We look to the classics, a children's book. How does a children's book work? One that is guaranteed to be so compelling that even a child will take the time to look through it. We have a picture and we have a headline. We don't even need any more text in this one. Look to the classics now. Modern advertising. We have a picture, we have an image, we have a piece of text. When we want to build a good slide, we look no further than those things we've just seen. And here I want to show you how we divide up our slide page. Imagine that we're looking at whether it's PowerPoint, Prezi, or our napkin. I want to show you with blue here some guidelines about building a good slide. You'll notice that the slide extends all the way to the far ends of my screen. And you'll also notice that I put a box cutting off a little bit of the outside. And we're going to call this zone out here the ADIZ, the Air Defense Identification Zone, which means that nothing is going to go into this space. That stuff we're going to leave completely empty. That's going to be called white space. We don't let anything in there. And then we're going to divide our page up into a top, which is fairly narrow, a middle, and a bottom, which is about the same size as the top. We're also going to cut our page right down the middle, and we're going to decide that we're going to center things in that page. Let me show you exactly what I mean. Into the top, we put our headline. Into the middle, we put our picture, and into the bottom, we put our descriptive text. And remember, the no-fly zone, we don't put anything. So if we were to eliminate the template component, what do we see? It looks like this. Here's our slide. We have a headline, And in this case, we'll say air defense identification zones are starting to conflict. And here we have an image that shows something interesting recently that took place where China, South Korea, and Japan have all decided to declare exactly the same airspace as their own air identification zone. And let's hope that this conflict does not lead to any further conflict. That's how we build a slide. Our no-fly zone around the outside to give us some white space, our headline on the top, our caption on the bottom, and our image in the middle. Now, of course, there are going to be some variations. One variation would be, let's look at our standard. Our headline at the top, our image in the middle, and our text. Headline, image, text. Well, we could have a variation that says we simply have the headline and our image. That would be kind of like the Nike ad. Or we could have a slide where we have our headline and we just have some text. Kind of like this page right here, in fact, isn't it? We could have a page where we have nothing but our image, and the headline is something that we will say, and we could have a page where we have nothing but a piece of text, and you'll have seen some of those as we've gone through. So those are the only real variations, but all of them are essentially based again on the idea of 3 parts to the page, and we pick all 3, 2 of the 3, or 1 of the 3. We never go to 4 or 5 of those 3. Let's talk real briefly about some of the design elements that you're going to face as you start to build out your slides. Let's talk about typefaces, otherwise known as fonts, for a moment. One simple rule to remember, and here it is. Less is always more when it comes to typefaces. Always limit ourselves to 2 maximum typefaces on any one slide. One of them will be a sans serif font. That's one like here. And the other one will be a serif font. What is a serif font? It is one where the letters have these little feet sticking off. A sans serif one means there are no little feet. It's very visually nice to pair them. They complement each other very well. You typically would not want to have 2 sans serif fonts, nor would you want to have 2 serif fonts. If you need to have additional visual variety, all you do is you keep using the same font and you add bold. That's all I have to say on fonts. Less is always more. Let's talk briefly about color. Same rule. In the case of a presentation, less is always better than more. You'll notice as I do my presentations, I tend to limit myself to no more than 3 colors. I'm excluding, of course, the color photograph. Color photographs are great, but if we're talking about just the colors for our text and our boxes and our visual elements, limit ourselves to no more than 3 or 4. Rainbows are lovely, but the problem is from visual cognition, the more colors we see, the more we tend to get distracted as our eyes bounce around wondering why are all these colors here. When we want to point out to our audience what we want them to look at, we simply choose a smaller array of colors. Alright, so that's how to build a slide. So now let's talk about building the deck. What is a deck? We remember it's just where we put a bunch of our slides together in order to sustain our entire storyline. Stacking the deck means placing our slides in the order that makes our story the most captivating. That order is driven by which one of the 4 storylines we decided to choose for our presentation. And what this really means is having, of course, a main storyline that goes from beginning to end, that drives the presentation forward, and then lots of intersecting anecdotes or details that provide the detail and the conceptual color. In management consulting-ese, anybody who's worked for any one of the big management companies, you'll know that this is called horizontal vertical storytelling. Why? Because our main storyline is our horizontal line going all the way through our deck, and our verticals represent the individual details that support each one of the points in our story. I frankly think horizontal vertical storytelling is a terrible thing to call it, so we prefer the livelier name, our presentation's underlying message architecture, otherwise known as the Puma. What is the Puma? The Puma is the conceptual structure that we will use as we build out our deck. The head of the Puma is our main idea. Here's what we're actually going to be talking about today, ladies and gentlemen. The spine of the Puma is our main storyline. Here are each of the main episodes that take place that lead from our main idea. The legs of our Puma are all of our supporting ideas and details. For this particular story point, I'm going to talk about these details. For this one, I'm going to talk about these details. And then the tail is the end, the kind of one last hook that ends our story. This Puma is going to be our friend as we build out our presentation because it gives us an excellent way to think about building our deck. We start with a summary of our idea. This is how we build our deck. We may not present it this way, but this is how we build it. We begin with a summary of our main idea. We then block out the spine, which contains all of the elements that make up that main idea's story. Then we add in the supporting details in the form of the legs, and then we conclude with one little swish of the tail. This would be a good time to share some samples. Anybody who's been with me a little while, especially over these last 6 or 7 episodes, as we've been going through this new book of mine, Show and Tell, has had a chance to see 4 completely different presentations broken down into their individual building blocks step by step. Here's what I'd like to share with you. If we look at every single slide of every single presentation, they are all built on exactly the basis of what I just described to you. Every slide, no matter which one we look at, has a headline, it has an image, and it has text. A headline, an image, and text. A headline, an image, and text. A headline, an image. This one didn't even have any text, just the image. Headline, image, text. Headline, image, text. Headline, image, headline, image. When I was talking about the drama, I didn't even use very much text. Every single slide follows the model that I have just given you. You don't need to do anything other than build your slide and deck the way I just described. Let's look at some bad slides, slides that don't follow the rules. Here's a bad slide. Why? Because in a presentation, nobody is going to take the time to read through all of these bullet points. Bad slide. It doesn't have a single idea. This is another bad slide. We might say, hey, it's got a picture. That's true. But this is a picture that we don't know how to read because there is no description that tells us how to read this picture. Bad slide. Here's another bad slide. It does contain a picture. It contains all the elements. It's got a headline, it's got an image, and it's got some text. But what is the one idea? I have no idea what the one idea is. Had the headline told me what the idea of this slide is, it would have been a better slide, but as it is, it's a bad slide. Here's another bad slide because there is no big idea. There's some sort of decision matrix, which is interesting, that's interactive. This is the kind of thing that works really well if we're doing a handout and we're doing a discussion session. But if we're doing a presentation, this does not work because there's nothing for the audience to follow along. Terrible slide. Now we've got a headline and we've got text, but we've got no big idea and we've got so much text that no one is going to read it. Okay, let's get optimistic now. Let's look at some good slides. Here's a nice slide. Here's one that has a headline. The hero, an unassuming regular character who finds himself cast into the new world, and a picture with captions that describe what the slide's about. And here is the counter to that slide where we went from black text on a white background to white text on a black background, where we say if that before was the hero, here we now have the villain. A headline, a piece of description, and our image. Let's look at some more that are maybe a little bit more businesslike. Here's a slide from a technical presentation. Project Sylvester is underway. A headline, a little bit of text, and an image. In 4 short months, we've gone from a very sketchy version of our idea to a more fleshed out version of our idea to a finalized version of our idea. And then we say, but there are challenges ahead. There's a big idea. What's the one idea? We've gone from this, oops, but there are challenges. Here's another slide from that same presentation. Where are we aiming? Headline, description. The landscape right now, direct e-commerce. This has something to do with e-commerce, and here's our picture. And in this particular case, it's a map, and the map has on it a very clearly written caption. Here's another good slide. Headline. We have an option to solve our technical and schedule challenges. Why don't we partner with another company? Here's the drawing that shows what partnering would look like, and here's the text that describes. Let's look at some more good slides. Here's one taken from another presentation. This was a technical presentation, again aimed at building a new technical infrastructure for a healthcare company. A headline. Our business is 3 separate business units. An image that shows the 3 units, and a little bit of text that describes. So we're a hospital group, a medical group, and an insurance company. But we operate as separate businesses. Another good slide following that. Although we're 3 businesses, we all serve the same customer. Here's the headline, and here's the picture. And another good slide, continuing along in the same storyline. From a data perspective, we all see that customer a little bit differently. Here's the picture with some descriptive text. And here's another good slide that follows. Yet powerful external forces are requiring us to change how we view that customer. And here are those forces coming in. How now to build a build. And this is where we're going to conclude for today's session. Because I imagine many of you are asking, how is it possible to explain a really complex idea using these very simple slides? It is. And here's what I mean by a build. Many times in our presentations, we're going to have to explain a very complex idea, aren't we? We are, in fact, going to have to try to run a marathon that looks like a relay race. How are we going to do that? Here's how. If an idea is too complicated to explain on one slide, then we build the idea over several slides. If my idea is too complicated, I start with the basics on first slide. On the second slide, I build in another level of information on top of the previous. On the next slide, I build in even more details so that by the time I'm done with my build, the entire complex picture is clear because I took the audience with me. Do we all understand there are 3 elements? Yes, we do. And now do we see how those elements connect? Yes, we do. And do we now see that there are additional elements? Yes, we do. And by the time we're done, our audience looks at it and, along with us, understands how that complex idea was built. And I firmly believe that any level of complexity can be clarified by presenting that idea as a build. And I want to conclude with one final example. This was a presentation that was given to me and my team. And it is completely unreadable because it breaks all of the rules of having no good storyline and they are not good slides. So what we did is we completely reworked it, and here's what we came up with. And I want to show you how we built out a complex idea. We were looking at a particular information publishing company, and we found that there are 7 competitors to the company that we were working with. We were working with Thomson, and in Thomson's professional information publishing industry, there were 7 competitors: Bloomberg, Reed Elsevier, Pearson, McGraw-Hill, Reuters, Wolters Kluwer, and Thomson. What we realized in looking at the data is that each of those companies were bigger in different industries. So the size of this triangle represents how big the company was in terms of revenue in billions of dollars. So back when this data was collected in the year of 2001, Thomson was a $6 billion business, Pearson was almost as big, and so on down the list of competitors, ending up with little tiny Bloomberg at less than $3 billion. We saw additional patterns in the data that we looked at, and now I want to build for you what we saw. Let's plot all of those 7 competitors together based on their brand and their breadth. And what I mean by that is we're going to build a chart that shows along here the breadth of offerings from a single industry to multiple industries. And on the vertical scale here, we're going to plot out what type of brand recognition that company had around the world. If we map in the 7 different companies, according to this chart, what we see is that Bloomberg, with its small pyramid, and Reuters, with its bigger pyramid, are on this side of the scale because they really only represent one industry, but they have very high brand recognition. There are a clump of companies, Pearson, Wolters Kluwer, Reed Elsevier, that have a broader array of offerings but score poorly on brand recognition. And then there's Old Thompson, our client, which although it's the biggest of the pyramid, scores very badly on brand recognition and has the highest number of industry offerings. So if we were to look at this, we see that there's a sort of a regression line that goes down like this that seems to indicate to us the more industries a company is active in, the less brand recognition it seems to have. So now let's add another layer of information into this and show where brand recognition can be measured. If we now start to color in our pyramids, what we see is that those organizations that have high brand recognition, it's the corporation, it's the top of the pyramid that's really, really well known. And for those organizations like Thomson that have poor brand recognition, although their individual products might be well known, no one has ever heard of the corporation. And so we then, in this build, said we see an opportunity for Thomson to occupy this unclaimed territory of being a company with high brand recognition across multiple industries. Now the reason why this is important is that's a build. And that build was the one that we showed to the CEO of Thomson back in the year of 2001. The CEO looked at that map and said, I've worked for this company for 17 years. I've never seen our competitive space represented like this. It's really smart. And he said, what your chart also shows me is one way to grow Thomson, certainly we could move our pyramid up, but the other thing we could do is we could just buy that company. And that was the first time upon seeing this chart that anybody had ever heard Dick Harrington, the CEO of Thomson, say, we might even think about buying Reuters. And everyone laughed because they thought it was a bit of a joke. Well, you want to know what happened 7 years later in the year of 2008. Thomson went and bought Reuters. And now that company is called Thomson Reuters. And that chart that we put together could be said to have contributed to the $17.2 billion acquisition of Reuters by Thomson. And that's what I mean by a build. I want to conclude by thanking you all for staying with me and thanking the Puma that allows us to build out a storyline that makes an extraordinary presentation. Homework. Here's the assignment. I want you, based on what we've seen today and in the previous presentations, to create your own presentation. I want you to imagine any presentation you'd like to share. It could be an explanation, a pitch, or a drama. No reports. I'm not going to accept any reports. If you're going to make a report, no good. Turn it into one of the other storylines. Map out your relevant Puma and create a little 8 to 12 page slide deck, exactly as we've done today. Hey, thank you all for another great lesson. This is Dan signing off from the Napkin Academy, but don't go away. Now on our new platform, you can still submit your homework. Debbie, our community manager, is going to join you right now to show you exactly how to do that, and I really encourage you, do your homework. Okay, take it away, Debbie. See you soon.
We hope you enjoyed this Napkin Academy classic video. We've made it easier than ever to share your homework. After you've completed your homework and have a JPEG or PNG file saved on your computer, come back to this course. Once you're back here, scroll to the bottom of the screen, and in the comments box, you can add a comment. I'm just going to call this one My Homework. You can also add images by clicking on the Insert Edit Image button here. In the source box, click on the file. In the Images window, click on Upload, and then click on Add Files. This is going to take you to your computer where you can search for your images. I'm just going to search for mine in Pictures, and I'm going to choose this image here. You can also add multiple images here. Click Upload. After the upload is complete, click Close. Then scroll down, and you'll see that the last image is here, and it's checked. This is the one we just uploaded. Click Insert. I suggest in the Dimensions box you change the maximum to 1200 pixels and leave the Constrained Proportions box checked. You can also add an image description here if you'd like. Click OK. You'll see that your image has been added to your comment. And now the last step, the most important one, make sure that you click the green comment button here to upload your homework to the Napkin Academy. We hope to see your homework soon.